When working with an array of objects, you may need to find a specific object in the array to work with it or to remove it from the array. In this tutorial, we're going to look at that process. Welcome to another tutorial from All Things JavaScript. As always, make sure to click that bell button and subscribe, and remember to check out the discount links to all of my courses in the description. I really appreciate the support. And if you'd like, there are other ways to support the channel, which are linked to in the description as well. For example, if you provide support through Patreon, you can get access to all the code files for all the tutorials. And for a list of all the tutorials, which are over 230 now, you can go to the website. Now, there are a number of approaches for identifying a specific object in an array of objects. But for this approach, I'm going to use the find index and find methods of arrays because I haven't done a tutorial on those methods yet. So both methods provide a way to find an element in an array. That element could be any type of value. For example, we're going to be using an object in this particular tutorial here, but it could be any value. Now, the main difference between these two methods is that find returns the actual element, the actual value, while find index just returns the index position of that element. Both of these methods are higher order functions, and we need to pass in a testing function as a callback. The first element that it finds, that testing function finds that matches, is returned. So that's basically how they work. Let's look at some examples here. All right, this is the array we're going to be working with, and as you can see, it's an array of objects. So first, what I want to show you is just basically how the find method works. That's the one we'll show first. So I indicate the array dot find, since it is a method of arrays, and then I need to pass in the callback, the testing function that I talked about. So let's go ahead and do that. So I need to provide a parameter. I'm going to do an arrow function here. I'm going to need to provide a parameter that will store each element in the array, because it's going to check each element until it finds a match. As soon as it finds a match, then it will return that one. And so val is the parameter that's going to store that element. And so that's what I then can use for testing purposes over here. So I just check val.id, and in this example, I'm just going to see if it's equal to 3. So we're looking for an ID of 3, so it should match James here. So if we simply save that, I'm going to reload this and show the console. Then if I display the results, sure enough, we get James, the object that had James, ID of 3. Now that just found it and returned it. As we can see, it did not modify the array. So that's great. That's a thing I like about find and find index. It doesn't mutate the array that it's working on. It returns the value, and then you're good to go. Now, this type of thing would actually make more sense as a function. So let me just do that really quick. I'm going to call it getObject, and we're going to have an ID and array passed into this object, and then it will find within the array any ID that matches what we passed in, and it will return it. And so like we did before, we do the find method, and then here's our testing function. And it's just val.id equal ID. And it will return that for us. So we could simply test that one. Let me go ahead and do another statement here. Get object, that's the function we want to try out. And I'm going to pass in a 3, and I'm going to pass in the array we've got created up here, ARR. And that will get passed into this variable here, different variable. This variable scope is this function. So it'll be passed into this variable here, and then we'll use the find method on it using the ID that's passed in as well. So I'm going to comment out this line, and we'll check the results again once I refresh this page. So we should get the same thing, and we do. So that works much better as a function. Now, let's talk about find index. How is find index different? Well, let's go ahead and copy this function here that I created. And I'm going to come down, and we're going to call this one find object. So I'm just going to change the name of this one here. Because what we're going to do is return the index position as opposed to the actual value, the actual object. So everything's the same here. Basically, all I changed is find to find index. All right. And then we'll test it with this again, except this time we got to call find object. And I'm going to comment out that one there. So let's just check results again. This time, as mentioned, we should get an index number, not an object. And sure enough, there's an index number to the object. It's index value of 2 because it's the third one in the array. All right. Now, getting the index position, the reason you may want to do that is you may want to remove the element from the array. And that could be done with splice. Using that index number, you could do it with splice. But I think there's a better way. I think a better way is to use the filter method of arrays to do that. So let's do one more example, and that's going to be removing an object from an array. So I'll comment out that one. We'll create one more function, and we're going to call this one remove object. And once again, this is going to receive two parameters, an ID, and then the array we're going to remove the object from. Now, because we're using the filter method, it's not going to mutate this array. It will return a new array, which is really how we want to do this. Those types of functions are easier to reason about. These pure functions are easier to reason about and prevent errors. All right, so here's how we use filter. The array and then dot filter, because it's a method of arrays. Now what we pass into the filter method is a function as well. This function is used to filter through every element in the array and determine whether that element should be returned and be a part of the new array. So it's going to create a new array, and we're basically determining which elements, in this case objects, should be a part of that new array. So we want to include every object except the ID that's passed in. And so here's how we would set that up. We got to pass in a function. There's the parameter to the function that's going to store each element as the filter method cycles through the array. It'll store each element, and then val.id not equal to ID. If it's not equal to the ID passed in, then we'll include it in the new array. If it is equal to the ID passed in, it will not be included. So only those things that are not equal to will be included in the new array. All right. So let's go ahead and check the results of that. So let results equal remove object, and we're going to pass in the same thing there to test that out. We save that. Now let's refresh this, take a look at the results. This results should be an array, and James should be removed, which it is. Now notice, like I said, it didn't mutate the original array. That still has 4 elements in it. And that's really what we want to do with a function like that. So find and find index, a couple ways to work with arrays when you're trying to find specific elements. All right, please hit the like button and subscribe. And remember the discount links to all my courses in the description section. If you want to learn about all the different array methods in JavaScript, I have a course specifically on that. It's called Mastering Arrays. Click that bell button to be notified about new releases. I release tutorials as often as I can, and thanks for watching.